Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Midway, which occurred on June 4th to 7th, 1942. After the Battle of Coral Sea, Japan realized the United States Navy posed a serious threat. Yamamoto wanted to destroy what was left of our Navy, and especially our aircraft carriers. Now, Midway Island is a small island, about 2.5 square mile atoll, barely above sea level. It's about 1,300 miles west of Pearl Harbor. It's midway between the United States and Asia. It was a rest area for Pan Am flying boats, known as the China Clippers. And the U.S. military also had an airstrip on the island. Now, Japan saw the strategic importance of Midway Island, and Yamamoto makes plans to invade the island. One, he doesn't really consider Midway important, but he knew the U.S. would be forced to defend it at all cost. Two, he wanted to lure the remaining U.S. aircraft carriers into a trap to sink them. He considered them the main threat to Japan. And three, capturing the island would expand Japan's defensive perimeter. Four, he felt that another demoralizing defeat would force the U.S. to give up. Here we see the relationship of Midway Island to Hawaii and Japan. And you can see there on the map that the United States could not allow the Japanese to control Midway Island since their proximity to the Hawaiian Islands and Pearl Harbor. If they did capture it, they would have to pull their fleet from Pearl Harbor back to San Diego. Now, Yamamoto's plan also had problems. One, he thought the U.S. only had 2 carriers in the Pacific. Actually, they have 3. The Japanese thought that the Yorktown was sunk at Coral Sea. It was severely damaged, but was patched up quickly, inside of 3 days. 2, the force was smaller than he wanted. He had 6 fleet carriers, but only 4 were available for the attack. The Shokaku had suffered 3 bomb hits at Coral Sea and would take months of repairs, and the Zuikaku lost so many pilots at Coral Sea it had to return to Japan for more pilots, which were not ready when the fleet sailed to Midway. Now, Nimitz had a major advantage. He knew the Japanese plan. The U.S. broke the Japanese code, so the Americans knew where, when, and in what strength the Japanese would appear. Now, in contrast, the Yamamoto was totally unaware of the true strength of the American force and their location. He thought they were in Pearl Harbor. The Japanese main carrier striking force had 4 carriers: the Akagi, the Kaga, the Hiryu, and the Soryu, all veterans of Pearl Harbor and again commanded by Admiral Nagumo. Now, Nimitz had his 3 carriers, Enterprise and Hornet, which had just returned from the Doolittle raid, along with the Yorktown that he could use at Midway. However, his top commander, Admiral Halsey, was very sick in the hospital. So Admiral Raymond A. Spruance was put in command of the fleet. At 6:20 in the morning on June 4th, Japanese bomb Midway. The battle has begun. Bombers hit oil tanks, as you can see here in the picture, burning on the island. One of the Americans killed in the attack was Major Lofton R. Henderson, United States Marine Corps. He was the first Marine pilot killed in the war. Later, during the Battle of Guadalcanal, the United States would capture the Japanese airstrip and rename it after Major Henderson. Late on June 4th, American planes catch the Japanese carriers by surprise. Now, Nagumo plans on a second attack on Midway, but changed his plans when an American carrier, the USS Yorktown, was sighted. Here we see the Yorktown. Nagumo didn't know that he had also been sighted, and planes were headed his way. Plans to change their bombs so they can sink the carrier. So they're going to use torpedoes instead of high explosive bombs. Japanese planes were in the process of being refueled and rearmed when the American planes attacked. The Americans attack in two waves. The first wave were 41 of the obsolete Devastator torpedo planes that attacked the Japanese carriers. They score no hits, and 37 of the 41 Devastators were shot down. After the Battle of Midway, the Navy stops using them. The second wave, 37 Dauntless dive bombers attack. This was devastating. Because so much fuel, bombs, and torpedoes were on the flight decks, the damage was increased with large explosions. In just 5 minutes, American planes sink 3 Japanese aircraft carriers. You see here, these are artist renditions showing the attack on the carriers. The only carrier, the Hiryu, escapes. Later, Japanese planes from the Hiryu find and sink the USS Yorktown. It had survived the Battle of Coral Sea, only to be sunk at Midway. Here we see pictures of the flak being shot in the air to try to stop the Japanese from attacking. The Japanese scored a number of hits, and eventually they realized that the Yorktown couldn't be saved, and they abandoned ship. The next day, the American planes find and sink the 4th Japanese carrier, the Hiryu. Nagumo orders the fleet to return to Japan. Over the next 2 days, American planes attack and sink ships. Midway is a decisive victory for America. 5 minutes changed the course of the war. Japan lost 4 carriers, 300 planes, and many experienced pilots. During World War II, Japan had 14 carriers, while the U.S. would eventually build 104. After Midway, Japan can't make any more offensive actions. They would fight a defensive war over the next 3 years. That concludes our session on the Battle of Midway. I hope you enjoyed it. I have 5 questions here that if you could answer and upload into Google Classroom. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.